Hi guys, Arnold is a very powerful modern rendering engine that has been used in many big budget films. I've rendered this glass sculpture scene using Arnold, and I'll use it to show my workflow in setting up, iterating, and debugging with the Arnold render in Houdini. One of the main advantages of using Arnold is the ability to get a very realistic looking image right out of the box without having to tweak a bunch of settings. This image was rendered using a few simple shaders and two lights. The main geometry is using a glass shader with subsurface scattering, while everything else is using a plane diffuse shader. I rendered this image on GridMarkets using the free trial version of Arnold and Houdini Indie. One thing that is great about this workflow is that GridMarkets allows me to render unwatermarked full HD image sequences without owning an Arnold license. Instructions about how to install Arnold and what versions are supported can be found in the knowledge base section in the user portal. Before I explain how to set up and render with Arnold, I want to clarify a few points. Houdini lights and Mantra shaders are not compatible with Arnold. Arnold uses its own set of lights and shaders. All the compatible lights and shaders have Arnold on the node name. The standard camera node in Houdini is used to set your camera settings in Arnold. You set your camera settings just like you would for a Mantra render. If you are opening a scene that was created before you installed the Arnold plugin, you will need to add the Arnold Properties tab to your Geo objects and camera nodes. To do so, select a node and hit Tab. In the Arnold menu, select and click the Add Arnold Properties button. This will add an Arnold tab to your Geo node. This is needed in order to use attributes. Any new Geo or camera object created after you've installed Arnold will automatically have this tab. So, starting with this Geo, you can use attributes created in the SOP context to drive shader properties such as color, p-scale, opacity, etc., though the workflow is a little different than when using Mantra. Let's say we want to use an object's point color to drive the final render color. In the shop context, put down an Arnold standard SOP. The Arnold standard is the all-around Uber shader that is similar to either the Mantra principal shader or the Mantra surface shader. Additionally, GridMarkets also supports third-party shader libraries, such as the AL shader libraries developed by Anders Langlands. In this scene, I am using both the standard Arnold shaders and those found in the AL shader library. I tend to use the standard Arnold shaders if I'm creating simple shaders. For more complex shaders, I tend to use the AL shaders, for I feel they give you more fine-tuned control, and I prefer the layout of the parameters. Also, they come with some cool procedural shaders such as noises and more refined versions of the Arnold utility shaders. To access the attributes, dive inside either shader network and expose the input SOP connections. Hit Tab and type User. This will show the SOPs that can be used to import attributes. In this case, I want to import a color attribute, so I select User Data RGB. In that SOP's attribute parameter, I type the attribute for color. Finally, I wire the output of the user data SOP into the diffuse color input of the standard SOP. To assign this shader, go back to the object context and in the Material tab in your Geometry node, select the shader. Alternatively, you can dive into your network and assign shaders using a Material SOP. Now let's set the render settings and submit the scene. In the Out context, put down an Arnold ROP. This is where you set your render quality settings, and it is similar to the Mantra ROP. This scene is composed primarily of refractive and specular surfaces. An easy way to check which passes are contributing the most to your scene is to output the different render passes, also known as AOVs. You can set which passes you want to export by clicking on the plus button next to the AOV parameter in the Output tab in your Arnold ROP. This will not export the passes to separate image files, but will instead output the RGB beauty render with all the AOVs stored as metadata. To view the separate passes, you can use the built-in image viewer that ships with Houdini. To load your renders, go to the Render menu and in InPlay, select Load Disk Files. Once you have loaded your image file, you can use the drop-down menu at the top to see the individual passes. For some passes like depth and ray count, you will need to change the pixel values to see the correct result. You can do this automatically by clicking on the Adapt to Full Pixel Range button or by pressing Shift-R. Using refractive materials can add a lot of noise to your render. You can reduce the amount of noise by increasing the overall camera anti-aliasing samples and increasing the sampling rays on your lights. In order for glass to render properly, you need to make sure that you have enough refraction ray depth samples. The higher the ray depth, the further light rays will be able to travel through geometry. GridMarkets gives users an incredibly fast and powerful workflow for iterating sample values to help tweak and optimize your renders. Let's say you want to see how your image changes when you increase your refraction ray depth. Instead of rendering one frame at a time on your workstation, you can create multiple Arnold ROPs with different ray depth samples and connect them into a single render submit ROP. This allows all the different iterations to render in parallel, saving you a lot of time. Here you can see how increasing the refraction ray depth samples changes the look of the render. Something I like to do to stay organized is to have Arnold output a log file that will automatically be downloaded with your render. To do this, go to the Diagnostics tab and check Log to File. I then like to copy the output picture parameter and reference it in the Log to File parameter. Just be sure to add .txt at the end so it gives you a text file. Next, in the log verbosity parameter, change the output to detailed. By doing this, you get a log file named the same as your image, so they will appear next to each other when downloaded. It also makes it super easy to associate the log file with the image in case the two files get moved to separate locations. The log file will contain all of your render settings, as well as a lot of other useful information, including memory usage and ray counts. I know you're all great with version control, but in case you're not, this can be a lifesaver. Once you have all your settings in order, wire the output of the Arnold ROP into the render submit ROP. The submission process is the same as if submitting with Mantra. Fill out the frame range and authentication tabs, and then hit Submit Render. If you are using third-party shaders, you will need to do a few extra steps to upload those shaders and specify they're for Arnold use. Find the shaders in the preflight and add a root variable. Remember to specify this remote root type as DSO. Remember that for all third-party shaders, you need to have and upload the Linux version of those shaders. If you're on a Windows or Mac machine, don't upload the ones you're using locally. They will not work. Check to see if all the other settings are correct, and hit Save and Continue. Once the GridMarkets launcher is displayed, double-check the settings and hit Go. You can view your job's progress by hitting the Open Manager Console button on the Render Submit ROP. As stated at the start of this tutorial, you don't have to purchase an Arnold license to get unwatermarked images. I submitted this job with the free trial H2A plugin and was able to get renders that were 100% watermark free. As long as you have render credits, you can render with Arnold from Houdini as many times as you want. Finally, I wanted to give a quick reference to Shayna Leib, the artist whose work inspired this project. You can find more of her work at her website. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to you using our service.